What's up, humans? And welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope everybody's doing okay. In today's episode, I have, for the third time on the channel, Professor Stephen Brown from Ohio State University. Welcome back, Professor. How you doing?
Doing well. Good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, great to see you again. How's everything been? Um, Life in general, everything okay?
Everything is going okay. These are puzzling and challenging times, and I'm experiencing life like everybody else is. But yeah, things are good over here.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit. Start with that, maybe, because you talk about puzzling and challenging times. I was on a Clint Weldon show. I was actually interviewing Clint Weldon on the channel, and he started talking about how challenging it has been since the new administration started. And my channel is not about politics. I don't intend to talk about politics, but we can't ignore everything that's going on and all the chaos that's been going on. And you and I have had a few talks about how reactive it can get
Mhm.
with the tribalism and the whole political bias stuff. So, how have you been experiencing, specifically in the field of ufology, this division that it has been very evident over the last couple of months?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, obviously, Trump himself and various other members of the administration were kind of signaling that there would be I mean, Trump was saying, right, like, well, as soon as I get into office, I'll tell people what these drones are. And, he's pushing for UFO disclosure. We have this, um, this congressional pseudo mandate, right? Like Luna has a certain amount of authority to do something, but actually she doesn't have any subpoena power unless she works with oversight. And right. So, but it's also bundled in with all this other stuff, the JFK stuff, and the other, conspiracy theories. Which, by the way, just for the record, I don't know what to make of those other conspiracy theories. Like, I've never actually gone down any of those rabbit holes. Remember that I'm new to the UFO world, and that's been more than a handful for me. So I literally have nothing to say about any of those other views.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I was certainly skeptical that we would see any dramatic disclosure early on. That seemed like posturing or maybe just naivete, right? Like, it does seem like we have, under the assumption that all this stuff is real, David Grush and Elizondo and friends are telling the truth. It does look like Trump was at least partially read in. He's spoken on multiple occasions about being briefed by Air Force pilots who encountered a flying saucer, but it's not clear what else he knows. And yeah, so I've also expressed some concern about this being the administration when and if we do get more substantial disclosure. And yeah, I know politics is complicated, but I think there's obvious reasons to be concerned about um, uh, political leadership distancing itself from its historic allies in NATO, for instance. Um, so, doing what appears to be a very, very broad economic war with these tariffs with everybody except Russia is a strange thing to ponder
And
about.
extremely reckless too.
And reckless, yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not a finance person, but from what I can tell, the people who are finance people are pretty concerned about this. And, can I imagine in the abstract some wisdom involved in an economic strategy that focuses on, rebuilding domestic production of things? Yeah, sure, of course. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. Is this the right method for doing that? I don't know. I get the impression that the people who know these things are skeptical that this is the right method to do that. But I'm not here to talk about economics. I am here to talk about the possibility of disclosure. And, it would be a pretty big deal if, look, that's an understatement. It would be a huge deal if it turned out that the United States had been hiding stuff from the global population for almost 80 years now of the magnitude that David Gresham Elizondo and friends are talking about, right? And that would be politically disruptive. Alex Wint here at OSU, he gave that nice talk at Soul Foundation on the kind of international relations implications of disclosure, and they're concerning, right? And yes, so I don't know what we're going to get out of this administration. I am skeptical about this administration having a well thought through, globally minded approach to whatever it is that needs to be disclosed. And like, clearly, in my view, this is one of these moments when we need to be approaching this not as Americans, well, not as Republicans, not as Americans, as humans. Like, this is a humanity-sized moment. And yeah, look, Trump has a tendency to not be a humanity-sized person, right? Like, he has this kind of nationalistic vision, and I doubt that will blend well with what needs to get done next. So yeah, I'm concerned.
Yeah, and we're supposed to leave the materialistic paradigm of sorts, you know. And I
Yeah,
don't think Trump is even uh, in the vicinity of what that means, you know.
that's probably right.
Honestly, yeah. But I wanna
Probably
stay there.
not watching the telepathy tapes and stuff.
I want to stay there for a little bit because I do have some concerns that I've been looking at emerging over the last few months, which is that big money, specifically tech bros,
Yep.
have been getting more involved in the UFO topic. And I have expressed my concerns in this channel before about many of them, but I would like to hear your perspective. What do you think about what's happening right now with people like Elon Musk being extremely coy about it,
Yeah.
sending a few signals sometimes, Peter Thiel with his Palantir efforts, and essentially being like the first, his first client was the CIA. So
Yeah.
he is essentially balls deep in there, you know, quote so to speak. Um, and also the Skywatcher team, which is
Yep.
also run by one of these guys, and he seems a little more altruistic than the other two. But I would like your perspective on this. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it won't be too surprising given what I said a minute ago about my, concerns about global mindedness, that I'm very worried about the degree to which economic and political power are increasingly in the hands of fewer and fewer people, right? Like, that's not a good thing. And it is because of that problem in general that it's showing up here specifically, right? Like, who has the money to fund something like Skywatcher? Someone who's been very successful in the kind of entrepreneurial space. They've made a lot of money, and they're using it for these reasons. Um, I have broad concerns about large scale inequalities like this. Sometimes people push back and they're like, why do you, what's the problem you have with people, benefiting from the rewards of their ingenuity and their hard work? And I don't have any problem with that. What I do have a problem with is the degree to which, once a high amount of inequality like that emerges, how much power that gives somebody, right? Like, I don't really care if they, bracketing some of the other concerns like environmentalism and stuff like that. Like, I don't really care if you have a yacht or two or three or how many houses you have. And like, fine, great. That doesn't hurt me for you to go have a nice time with nice stuff, right? You can have a closet full of Rolexes and good on you, right? But when that money gives you the kind of access to political power that it does, that is worrying, right? Like, we're supposed to be, those of us who are democratically minded, right? We're supposed to value that all of our voices matter, especially in making determinations about the coercive power of the state and how we use that, right? Like, that's supposed to be a democratically governed process, and it's not. Like, it's just as a matter of actual fact, it's not. If you have huge amounts of money, then you have huge amounts of influence, right? And
Yeah.
that's concerning. And sometimes people talk about, like, we want successful um these successful business people in charge of things because of their business success. And I can certainly imagine areas of government where that might be true, where there's kind of a technical expertise, a technical management kind of expertise, project management oversight that we could think business folk would have especially good insight on. Perhaps that's correct. Do I think that by making a lot of money, you understand geopolitics? No. Like, you understand the deep history of, say, just to pick the most obvious example right now, the deep history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Do I think a tech bro is going to be better at thinking through that than somebody else? Absolutely not, right? Nonetheless, with the kind of political power that money can get you, you might be able to shape things in a discussion like that. So, right, there's essentially no correlation between wealth accumulated through business acumen and wisdom, right?
Yeah.
There's no correlation between that and kindness, or if there is a correlation, it goes the wrong direction, right? I mean, if you look at the tests that they do for antisocial personality disorder, which is the spectrum where you get sociopathy and psychopathy, and like the people who consistently test the highest on that are CEOs and politicians, right? So, like,
Yeah.
they're going to be low empathy people. I mean, for heaven's sake, Elon has, like, recently gone on, I think that was Joe Rogan or something, and said, like, empathy is the great weakness of Europe or something, or the West. And it's like, okay, like, that's absurd, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that, especially in my world where I'm concerned with the philosophy of religion, the history of religion. Like, the idea that empathy is a vice is just madness, right? And, like, this is what happens when you give CEOs too much power, right? Like, they take their kind of lack of empathy and their willingness to just kind of do what needs to get done to get ahead, and then they start making policy decisions. And, like, I don't want them making those policy decisions. So, anyways, that's kind of a large scale politics problem. How does that relate to disclosure? Similarly, right? Like, I don't want to pick too much on Soul Foundation. I have, I like the Soul Foundation folk. I think that the project of the Soul Foundation is wonderful. The last two conferences they have done were fantastic. I was, honored to be able to go to the most recent one, and I was one of the best experiences I've had in the world of ufology. That being said, there was this whole last series of events, which was about entrepreneurial stuff, right? And, like, how might we exploit these technologies, the knowledge that we could get here to make more money and to build successful businesses. And Skywatcher is doing the same kind of a thing, right? Let's get some moneyed investor types and let's go do independent freelance UFO observation, perhaps UFO recoveries, right? That's what they're trying to do. And then we could, the people who funded that would then have access to that for their own entrepreneurial reasons. And okay, like, I'm also worried about that, right? Like, this is supposed, and I mean, I don't want to critique Skywatcher too much here. It looks like they're actually being pretty transparent about their process and releasing their information to the public. And as long as they continue to do that, great. But as soon as there's a profit motive to hide information from the public, because now it allows for a kind of competitive advantage in the business world, well, then that transparency will very likely disappear, right?
Yep.
Because their investors will then say, hey, cool, let's not put out any more videos for a while, because we're going to go take this egg we just recovered and bring it into our research and development lab, and we're going to try to figure out how we can make money with this, right? Well, okay, at that point, it's not a publicly facing project anymore. It's no longer concerned with the broad education, awareness, raising of humanity, except as filtered through a business model, right? And like, I don't want it to be filtered through a business model. I don't want to hear what Skywatcher is discovering only when that enables Skywatcher's investors to make money on it, right? Like, that's not the way I want this to be. That being said, I do understand, like, we still live in a world where you have to make money to survive, and people need to make money to survive, and I have this own problem for myself as I've started this organization, the Visible College, and but that's been a hobby project for me. I do it in my spare time. I did most of the initial work to set it up, along with some of my other colleagues, especially Jed Verity, over the summer, because I don't have to work as much over the summer. And I'm coming into a new summer, I'll be able to get a little bit more done. But when the semester comes, I'm busy because I have classes to teach and students to take care of, and so there's a part of me that wants to be able to get paid so that I can just work on this, right? But then, then you run into all these problems that we've seen so many times, right? As soon as people get into the space and they start saying, "Hey, we need more money to do this," then people start getting skeptical that they're only doing it for the money, and that's quite a thorny nest of problems that we face, right? It's like,
Yeah.
we want everything to be free, and we want everything to be of the quality that we would get from a professional, right? So there's this pressure on people like me to do professional level work without reimbursement. And it's like, well, okay, I can't actually afford to do that for very much, right? I can, to some extent. Academia is nice in that regard. We have a decent amount of free time that we can use for kind of, research and, preparing for our classes and stuff like that. So I can and do and have used it for those kinds of things. But yeah, there's obstacles there. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of note, like, I'm not beating up on Skywatcher for raising funds to do what they're doing. But I do have these background concerns about how much influence politicians and CEOs will have over what humanity gets to know. And that doesn't feel like the right filter for us to, as a whole human species, come to grips with what's happening. Like, I don't want to filter that through political agendas. I don't want to filter that through business agendas. Like, I want to filter it through human well-being related agendas.
Yeah.
At a species and planetary level. And I'm skeptical that, especially this administration, which is very nationalistic, and these business people are likely to be able to bring that perspective to this.
Yeah, and I guess because you brought up what happened with Seoul, I was part of the mass blocking that happened on Twitter, and I was blocked by them. I was blocked by Dr. Nolan because I expressed my concern. Maybe I could have used a different choice of words, but I don't think I was rude. I used the word elitist because I think that fourth tier expressed how they are not able to read the room. And previously, before I expressed my concern, I expressed it privately with some of their people. And I told them, if you do this, when this comes out, this is going to happen. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, in the messaging is where the problem lied, because I don't have an issue with them trying to seek for like high net worth donors who can help them out. But if you do it like out in the open and in public, that's going to rub some people the wrong way, especially those who feel left out, those who don't have those means to pay $25,000 a year to get dinners with Jacques Vallée or with, so that was just my concern about that specific aspect. With Skywatcher, my concerns are different because we're talking about a group of people who have knowledge of these secret programs. And I am specifically interested in this Psionics secret program because there's a lot of shady stuff that has been talked about that allegedly happened with even minors involved. And that's extremely concerning. And I think that needs to be addressed at some point. If it's not true, come out and say it and explain, and especially those who know what's going on. And those are my concerns with them. But I wanted to ask you about this work that you've been doing in your spare time, because you have a YouTube channel and you've been doing the very first lecture that went like really viral was the one about the Nazca mummies, but you've done some really interesting ones after that. You did one about the Prime Directive, which I really liked. And the most recent one is about time travel.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk to you about that because this is something that's been in the back of my mind for a while, that there's a lot of data that kind of points towards that.
Hmm.
There's the Michael Masters book that talks about the extraterrestrial model. I've been talking to Dr. Piotti, who talks to me about time travel often, but I want to hear your perspective because you use some examples from science fiction films and this hypertime concept. What is that?
Yeah, good. So the I have been just as a science fiction nerd interested in the philosophical problems that emerge from time travel fictions. In particular, my concerns have not been about technical feasibility or anything like that. It's been about, honestly, it's been about the experience of the people going through the stories, because I am among those who believe that we need to at least leave open the possibility that we have robust agent causal indeterministic free will, right? That I actually do have multiple courses of action available to me, and somehow in being an agent, being a person, I have the capacity to make some of those happen over others as an act of my will, right? Like how that works out, I have no idea, but I experienced something like that, and so I've wondered, right? Like, if you get yourself into these time travel movies, especially as people are aware that they're time travelers, it seems like they should be able to do things that they're not supposed to be able to do, given the way that the time loops get set up and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I pondered about ways that this might get worked out. And up until recently, my favorite solution to this was just to take on some kind of a parallel worlds hypothesis, right? So I always use Back to the Future, but when Marty gets in the DeLorean and he goes back in time, he doesn't go back to in this kind of a view. He doesn't actually go back to his own past. He goes to a parallel world, which is just very similar to his own past up until that moment. And then he does whatever he wants to. There's either a branching universe or a parallel universe. And that actually solves most of the philosophical problems. It actually solves, I think, all of the philosophical problems. It doesn't solve the narrative problems, because then, there's the like, why would his hand fade out of existence? Because this person who he's hanging out with isn't actually his mom. It's his mom's variant in a parallel world. And anyways, there's those kinds of issues. Watch the video, people who are listening to this, to kind of get more details on how this works out. But
Link
that
in
kind
the
of
description, by the way.
link in the description. So, I think that's a philosophically consistent answer, but it's not really time travel. It's like parallel world jumping, or like
Yeah.
timeline jumping. But I had this conversation with a philosopher who I actually met at Yale when I was doing the Prime Directive talk, when I was hanging out with New Paradigm Institute, running this teach-in event that we did there with the Yale Student UFO Society. Um, Michael Glosson and I have been talking a bit about the time stuff, and I asked him one day, right, like, what do you think about this time extra tempestrial stuff? Like, I'm inclined to think that time travel doesn't really make any sense. And he kind of shared with me this experience that he had, which kind of helped him understand how this might work out. And he kind of convinced me that there might be a way of thinking through this. And in a nutshell, the idea is we have three dimensions of space, X, Y, Z. It seems as though we have one dimension of time, but let's just imagine that there is a second dimension of time. Then you could occupy a different. So, like, when Marty goes back to the past, what he actually does is he goes to the same point in time, but a different point in the second dimension of time, which I call hypertime. And so you might imagine beings, or kind of reality in hypertime changing the timeline across hypertime, right? So, like, at one hypertemporal moment, the timeline is one way. Marty doesn't exist in 1955. In a different moment in hypertime, the timeline is a different way, and Marty does exist in 1955. So there's actually been a change to what happened in 1955. And so there's a before and after, but it's not a before and after in time. It's a before and after in hypertime. So anyways, I fleshed this out in this video, and I have some cutesy graphics and stuff to help explain how that works.
Because this really ties into these one of, or at least a couple of these psionic abilities, right? Because when remote viewers are doing their thing, there are reports, and especially in with Ingo Swann and with Joe McMoneagle, who is known as the most talented remote viewer ever, where when they do remote viewing, they're not necessarily visiting a place in the same timeline that they are.
Yeah,
they're essentially visiting places in a different timeline. And there's also these precognition abilities that they're well documented throughout history, and there's people that report that they do that and they have that. Do you think that this potential time manipulation ability is tied to our consciousness in any way, or do you entertain the idea or the notion that these objects are time machines and somebody cracked them at some point in time? Which one is more viable to you, or maybe both? I don't know.
yeah. I mean, so the short version is I remain deeply puzzled about everything that's going on. So, I mean, I'm more on the like consciousness woo side of things than I am on the nuts and bolts side of things. So, like, I suspect, Jacques Vallée said a long time ago that he would be kind of disappointed if it turns out that these are just aliens and spaceships, right? Like, I'm with Jacques. I expect that we are not only dealing with aliens and spaceships. There might be aliens and spaceships, but there might be something. I expect that a lot of it, most of it, is weirder than that. Even if you watch the most recent Skywatcher video, right? Like, there are things apparently that are showing up in the sky, and we now have some decent footage of it. I know it's already the debunkers are already kind of going through. Well, that must be a balloon, and this must be this thing. But
Like
again,
clockwork.
yeah, but I mean, it's funny because like the debunkers have a tendency to be very selective about the data points that they pay attention to, right? So like when Jake says, "Yeah, and this thing came through at Mach 2," okay, but that's not a balloon, right?
Yeah.
And we have radar data on it. Okay,
Yeah.
if you've got Mach 2 radar data and visuals, that's not a balloon, right?
I want a Mach 2 balloon.
Yeah, I
Forget
mean
about the rest.
that would be great. Or if it's a balloon going Mach 2, then that is itself a paranormal phenomenon that
Yeah.
needs to be explained, right? Look, maybe it is a balloon, but it's a balloon in a warp bubble or something, right? Like, in which case we haven't actually solved the problem by saying that it's a balloon. It's the behavior that's the problem that needs to be explained. But yeah, anyways, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, right? Like Jacques and others have pointed out the striking similarities between the stories that we see in flying saucer, UFO, gray kind of encounters, and stories that we hear from fairies and succubi and incubi and
Jin.
jinn. Yep, angels, right? The airship waves that we saw in the late 1900s, right? Like, yeah, it's weirder than this, right? Like you can't just say, I believe in the flying saucers, but I don't believe in these other phenomena that have similar kinds of narrative structures and experiences that people are having. At the end of the day, all of that has to get explained, right? And how is it going to be explained? I remain puzzled, but yeah, I'm more and more inclined to think that what we might be dealing with is some kind of communication with beings of I mean, again, Grush Elizondo and friends talk about this kind of interdimensional, transdimensional hypothesis, beings that are very different from us, right? That things might appear to come out of nowhere and then disappear again, appear to move through space, but they're also appearing to not really move through space. Um, how does all of this relate to space? I don't know. I can tell you that hyperspace, additional dimensions of space, doesn't really introduce a lot of interesting philosophical problems, right? It's just sort of physics problems, and those are cool. And then, I hope the physicists can figure these things out. But if you're dealing with time, then you're dealing with these kind of causal loops, and that does relate to things like agency and our experience of the world, consciousness, and like how does all that fit together. And okay, those actually are philosophical problems, and those are the kinds of things that I want to tackle here. Now, I remain genuinely agnostic about whether we have any reason to believe that the phenomena that people are experiencing are best explained by time travel. I must admit that I haven't read the Michael Masters book yet. I'm generally familiar with the extraterrestrial idea, but I find it kind of puzzling from what I understand. And again, I admit my lack of knowledge here. The best reasons offered for thinking that the extraterrestrial model is correct is the striking similarities that exist between us and the Greys. We have a very similar anatomy. It appears as though, given the little bits of information that may or may not be trustworthy, that they have DNA. They might even have some kind of DNA overlap with humans. They might contain some of our genes, or we might contain some of theirs. Okay, if that's true, does that mean they're humans from the future? No. It means that we're genetically related somehow, and
Yeah.
we could be descendants of them. They could be hybrids of us and something else. We might have a common creator, a common engineer. We might be part of an ecosystem that's bigger than one planet, which is something that I don't think many people have taken seriously. But if there are these beings, these objects that can jump as fast as they seem to be able to jump, then they might be, I'm just speculating wildly, they might be something like, I know you and I both like space whales, right? The fictions of space whales, they might be space whales, right? Like they might be beings that actually can traverse space quite easily. And maybe they do something like planet pollination, right? Like bees jump between different flowers, and when they do that, they spread the genetic material of those flowers. Maybe these beings are like, I don't know, for whatever reason, they bounce between planets, and when they do that, they like drop off different members of different ecosystems, and like who knows how this even works, right? And like this is the problem. I mean, I've said this many times, right? But this is the problem with where we are epistemically. Like, given that we know, in my view, we know that something very strange is happening, right?
Yeah.
That we can't explain away
To
the
me,
Roswell.
that's undisputable at this point. Like,
Me too. Now we remain in the minority. When you say that my Nazca video went viral, it has like 40 to 50,000 views, right? And it's like, okay, that's cool. I'm proud of that. I'm glad that people enjoyed that video, and I'm glad I've been able to have so many interesting conversations. But like, that's not viral in YouTube
no, no,
speak,
no.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
YouTube
no.
speak is, like,
It's
I'm nowhere
viral for
near.
ufology, though.
Yeah,
It
fair
is.
enough. But this is my point, right? Like, ufology is nowhere near baby shark level
Oh no,
virality, right?
no.
So like, internal to the very small world that you and I occupy, it is beyond dispute that something very weird is going on, that we can't just explain these by simple misperception and deception, right? Like, it's something other than simple misperception and deception. Once you say that, though, the sensible thing to say next is, and we don't know what it is. Like we genuinely don't. Like the more you look at it, the weirder and weirder it gets. And there's more and more cases. There's clear trends through the cases. The people who are saying things, they seem to be sincere. They don't seem to be lying. We do seem to have some data points that are hard to get rid of. There's something going on, but we don't know what it is. And given, like, once you start allowing for interplanetary travel, especially, look, if you allow for time travel, all bets are off. Like, all
Yeah,
bets are off. Like okay, then who knows what could be going on? Our instincts about history, and especially if you allow hypertime travel like I've suggested, then the timeline itself could be revised, right? Like
Yeah.
then the history that we can record is only a part of history, because the timeline that we live in, and that everything we can observe, we observe within a timeline, right? Like we use our scientific instruments to date things, for instance. Well, but if 5,000 years ago used to be different than it is now, right? Then like you could in principle have, okay, just like pick out wild hypotheses, because this is my point, right? Like maybe the pyramids were built by some civilization that in this version of the timeline never existed, right? Because like time travelers went back and wiped them out, but for some reason they left the pyramids, right? Like then we could have these anomalies that don't fit in our timeline at all, because they're actually not from this version of the timeline. They're from a different version of the timeline, and there's some kind of residual leftovers, right? This is my point. Like once you allow for the strange things, rapid movement across large distance of space alone is enough to get you the weird space whale cross-pollination hypothesis. You allow time travel, anything is possible, right? And
Yeah.
so that's bad for trying to understand anything and kind of knowing how to live and make sense of our lives, right? Like at that point, we end up having to do things like the Buddhists do, which is basically say, look, you can't understand the world. So what you have to do is understand the cause of suffering, the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, and the solution to suffering. Right? Like that's all we have, because anything that depends on understanding the nature of reality, you can't do, because you just can't understand the nature of reality.
That sucks. Thinking about that, it kind of sucks. But I wanted to tell you though that another data point that Dr. Master's work does talk about consistently are the contact and abduction experiences that seem to have this um, time manipulation aspect to them. Lost
Mhm.
time, people with a larger beard after only 15 minutes away that seem like they spent days away. Stuff
Yep.
like that keeps coming up. So
So
it's not just, yeah.
that itself only demonstrates forward moving relativity, right? Which is like normal in the physics space, right? Like the right, this happens in interstellar. There's also backwards
Yeah.
causation in interstellar, but like you get in too strong a gravitational field, then you pass through time differently than other beings. But this is not time travel. This is just relativity. To time travel proper, it has to involve retrocausation, like actually an event from the future causing an event in the past. So I don't think. Well, I don't. I am not aware of a case that, even if I take it at face value, evidences retrocausation, evidences backward time travel. Just differential forward time travel. Differential forward time travel, we have to accept anyways. Einstein demonstrated that, right? Like that's special relativity. So yeah, I'd be interested to know. Now, from what I understand, I mean, even Masters had an experience where there was like a person channeling something to him
Yeah.
at like a conference, or he was giving a talk or something. And well, sorry, no, I think actually the contact was telepathic, right? He was saying
Yeah,
that
it
there
was
was kind of
telepathic.
a conversation telepathically, and he asked like, "Are you from the future?" And actually, I think that being was actually KG in the story, like didn't directly answer the question. Now, if my door opens and a 8 foot tall mantis walks in, and I say, "Wow, nice to meet you. Where are you from?" And he says 6 billion years in the future, and that provides me some evidence for time travelers, right? That I would want. Can you explain? Can you watch my YouTube video and tell me where I went wrong, right? Or where I went right, and like, is there anything you could do to demonstrate to me how might that work out? And I have lots of philosophical questions, right? I could imagine being convinced that time travel has actually occurred, right? But it would be weird. And you asked, and I kind of haven't yet gotten to the question about foreknowledge, precognition, and I mean there are definitely instances of apparent foreknowledge, right? And how might those be explained? hard to say. I mean, there is always the possibility of just. I mean, I understand how silly this might sound to people who are like really paying attention to this, but it could be a selective bias, right? Because like sometimes lots of people make lots of predictions about the future. Some of them are likely to come true, right? Most of them don't, right? Like it is true that almost everybody who tries to predict what will happen is wrong. And what does this mean? Does this mean that precognition is impossible? No, but it does seem to mean what Yoda said, right? The hard to see the future is always in motion, right? Like,
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, and this is my kind of a view, right? Like the future is in motion. The future isn't settled. So you can't see it in the sense that you can see something presently. You might see that there's like a trajectory that direction, and maybe you can get better than chance knowledge of what might happen, and maybe you could use that predictively in interesting ways, but that's not quite the same thing as seeing the future, right? That's like a bit of prediction.
There is the case of Rupert Sheldrake talks about this right before 9/11. There were a bunch of people who dreamt of airplanes hitting buildings, and a bunch of people dreamt that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is that? It's
Well, it's a good question, and it could be. So let's just take this at face value. I don't know whether I should take it at face value, but let's just take it to face value for the time being, right? What might that be? Well, look, there were people planning the 9/11 attacks significantly before they actually happened, right? Now we allow for things like telepathic contact, right? Which I think if you allow flying saucers and aliens of whatever these things are, grays and stuff, like they seem to be telepaths. So and
Yeah.
I'm on board with the telepathy tape stuff. There seems to be something weird going on. So if there's telepathy, then who knows what happens in the dream space, right? Like maybe people are picking up. You could imagine someone going to sleep on September 10th, right, and having a dream. What is the knowledge base of that dream? Telepathic contact with the terrorists who are about to do that the next day. They're setting their alarms to get up in the morning and go execute this and somehow people are picking that up, right?
wow, that's wild.
It is wild, right? There could be spiritual beings around, or these kind of higher dimensional beings around, or alternative dimensional beings around. Call them jinn, call them angels, whatever, right? An angel might know because they're paying attention to what these terrorists are up to, and they're coming to you in your dreams, and they're speaking to you somehow, right? Like all of these things are possible, and so for me, is hyper time travel of some kind, or time travel using hypertime, on the table philosophically speaking? Yes. Is it the best solution? It really depends on the details, and I have yet to see a case that convinces me that actual time travel is the best explanation, as opposed to telepathy, communication with beings who are making very effective predictions because they're more knowledgeable and better at predicting things than we are, and communicating those to us somehow. You see what I mean? Like there's other alternative hypotheses that are on the table that seem very quickly dismissed to me. That seem too quickly dismissed to me, right? Like,
yeah.
People very quickly say, well, the only solution is time travel, and it's like, no, that's not true. That's not the only solution. There are other possible solutions, and I'll grant you time travel is one of them.
Yeah, and it's the most if that is one of the solutions, it's one of the most convoluted ones.
Yeah. Well, and it breaks everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
like people. This is why I end my little talk with this joke that I like, right? Like, what do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? It's irrelevant, right? Like,
Yeah. See you whenever.
See you whenever. In a way, almost nothing matters at all if time travel is true, right? Because you can go back and undo it, and like that's just strange, right? Yeah, I worry about the ethical and spiritual implications of time travel, right? Like, should you undo your mistakes, or should you live with your mistakes and grow from them? Or, I can imagine certain things, of course, like if I could go back and prevent all the suffering of the Holocaust, I would do that, right?
Yeah.
Of course, I would do something like that, right?
But that also gets into a philosophical conundrum, because there's this famous idea that you go back in time to when Hitler is a baby, and
Yes.
that's very controversial because that's
Yeah.
a baby, dude. you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, if you really take these time travel things seriously, well, first of all, you don't actually prevent the Holocaust, right? Because in my view, you have a two-dimensional time space, right? So the Holocaust is located over here. Like the Holocaust did happen at this point in hypertime, right? And you could alter that at a later point in hypertime so that the same people, if you do this right, again, I flesh this out in this video, the same people could have a non-Holocaust experience in addition to their Holocaust experience, right? Which they might have forgotten. But that also feels ethically weird, right?
Yeah,
It feels weird to say that there was a being who went through the Holocaust, but we've like altered their experience of the world so that they have a parallel experience of not going through the Holocaust, and then they forget that they went through the Holocaust. That feels like a pretty important aspect of what that being is that's now been hidden from them, right? Like again, people don't think enough about how much these ideas relate to other things, right? Like, is this a weird form of gaslighting, or would it be better to say to believe what I actually think we have fairly decent evidence for at this point because of the past life memory studies at University of Virginia's Department of or Division of Perceptual Studies, right? Like there seemed to be evidence for reincarnation, and okay, so then maybe a better thing to hope for is not time travel that I could go back and undo the Holocaust, because again, I can't undo the Holocaust. All I could do would be to create to alter the timeline so that like the beings experience a not Holocaust containing history, but there was in Hypertime a Holocaust containing history. Is it better to do that, or to say, the beings who went through the Holocaust, they get reborn, and they get to live a different life that's informed by the life, shaped by the life that they went through in the Holocaust, and they get to grow out of the horrible thing that happened to them. That feels more karmically, ethically wholesome
yeah.
than time travel does. Anyway, these are the reasons. There's lots of reasons to be itchy about time travel. I just, yeah, please don't jump to that conclusion, anybody. But it's an interesting idea to think about.
Yeah, there's also the possibility that, as we've said before, a lot of things might be happening all at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yes,
So
yes, exactly. There might be time travelers and space aliens and angels and jinn, sure,
yeah, and
and
that
fairies.
that makes it even more overwhelming for some people.
Right.
But still, there are some aspects of these ancient and past civilizations that do invite us to think that at least they had like a different conception of what time is compared
Mhm.
to us, and because of the all of the astronomical knowledge that they did have.
Yeah.
And for example, the Mayan calendar, they seem to have like a better grasp of not just their present but also the future in many ways. And what do you think about that connection between the ancient civilization wisdom and their understanding of what time was, at least in the data that we have managed to uncover and pick up over time?
So, I mean, I guess I know that skeptics or debunkers like to use Occam's razor a lot, and I think they abuse Occam's razor because Occam's razor says don't introduce entities unnecessarily. It doesn't mean never introduce an entity until the very last conceivable moment. Like that's not what it is, right? Like often introducing an entity to your system generates a more coherent, more predictive, more generally functioning system. Well, when that happens, you should add one to the system, right? So I've been convinced by Grush Elizondo and friends that we should add in non-human intelligences of some kind. I have not been convinced by the puzzling cases that Michael Masters and friends point out that we should introduce time travel. So, for the time being, can I solve the problems that you're talking about? Ancient people's knowledge of astronomy and knowledge of the future of some kind. Can I explain that in ways other than time travel easily, right? Like the aliens could tell them. Can I explain it without aliens? I don't know. I don't know enough about these things, right? Like it might be one thing I think it's hard for modern people to really understand is how long humans have been around as opposed to our written histories, right? Like our written histories are, 5 to 10, maybe 15,000 years at the max, right? Like writing wasn't that old. And the oral histories do predate them, but who knows how far back they might go. But humanity has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And so could clever humans unaided by non-human intelligence watch the stars night to night? Yeah, in a world without light pollution too, right? Like it's very easy to see the stars if there's not artificial lighting. If fire's not that bright, walk away from it and look up. Like the universal experience of humans for hundreds of thousands of years was a deep intimacy with the stars. We know they use them for navigation. We know they use them to be able to tell what seasons were coming. And we know that they seem to have been able to do things like figure out when eclipses would happen, which is hard to do because that's over long periods of time, right? But you might be able to do everything that needs to get explained in the Mayan situation with just long running human ingenuity and a continuous oral tradition, right? Where people pass down knowledge generation to generation for very, very long periods of time. So I don't want to rule that out. Might there be aliens involved? I believe there are aliens. So of course there might be aliens involved, right? Like maybe they taught them stuff. Maybe they told them stuff. Maybe they made things for them, right? Like I genuinely don't know what to make about these very weird things going on with the Egyptians, right? Maybe there's this stuff underneath the pyramids. People are making this claim. I'm curious to see how this pans out, right? But like we know, everybody knows the most peculiar thing about Egypt is that uh, uh, the oldest relics, the oldest objects that we have, archaeological objects, are the most high quality, and that shouldn't make any sense, right? Like,
Those ancient vases are wild.
yeah, the boxes, the very hard stone precision cut. I think it's, I don't forget what stone it is, but like the burial casket boxes that are like solid stone that are cut with very precise angles. Like, how do you do that with sand and copper, right? Like that's because that's all we appear to know they had access to. There are legitimate puzzles about whether we can explain all of the Egyptian stuff using human ingenuity. Like I'm actually, I mean, again, because I believe Gresham Elizondo and friends, like uh, that's probably aliens somehow, right? That's
Yeah.
probably non-humans somehow, right? Or paranormal stuff that I can't even really wrap my mind around. But it's probably not. They probably didn't make, in my view, at this point, given my other assumptions, the Egyptians probably did not make those very hard stone, precisely made boxes by very slowly sanding away the material using sand. Like I bet that's not what it is. I bet there's
Yeah.
something else involved.
About that though, because there's like a correlation that I wanted to talk to you about, because there's this new word that has been going around since January, even a little bit before that, which is psionics.
Yeah.
And we know that ESP has been around for a while. It's been studied for a while,
Mhm.
and we know that shamanistic traditions use that as well, but they called it differently. Um, and recently, Whitley Strieber just released his book, The Fourth Mind, which talks about that. He proposes that humans are like on the verge of some kind of evolutionary step that we're about to take, and it has to do with our mind abilities, you could call them.
Yeah.
Some call them gifts, some call them powers. What is your overall take about that? Do you feel like there could be a possibility that we um, are on the verge of something like that, like some kind of entanglement that make us regard the world in different way that we do now?
I mean, yeah, I think if you take seriously the stuff that I take seriously, you kind of have to take that seriously. Take the telepathy tapes at face value, right? So, of course, somehow it might turn out that all of these observations that were made by Diane Powell and Kai Dickens and all them, they were making methodological mistakes, and somehow this is all being communicated non-telepathically, whatever. Set that aside, right? Assume that telepathy tapes is what it seems to be, which is evidence of these people with extraordinary mind-to-mind contact experiences. Okay, if that's true, then humans are capable of extraordinary amounts of direct mental contact. How many of us are capable of this? Well, for the people who claim to know this stuff, study this stuff, right? The kind of Project Stargate and the remote viewing and all this kind of stuff. The claim is that all of us have this as kind of a latent capacity that we can get better at, maybe not great at, but better at, right? Um, and assume that that's true. Might there be something on the horizon which enables us to, as a whole species, connect more effectively in that way? Sure, of course. Maybe there's a mutation that's spreading through the population. Maybe there's some kind of assistance that we get from other beings who are telepaths, and maybe it's technological, right? Like, after all, Elon and friends, they have, one of the Neuralink products is called telepathy, where
He
we can
already
put the
patented it.
right, so we can put microchips in people's brains, and they can think things, and then that goes to the computer, and then that gets transmitted, and we can use the computer to put things back in and feed them back into the brain. Like, brain computer interfaces will allow this kind of capacity, right? And that looks like it's very rapidly on the horizon, right? I talk a lot about AI in addition to the non-human. Well, I mean, AI is non-human, but the kind of weirder alien-y kinds of spiritual, extra-dimensional kinds of things, right? Like, I talk about those, but the AI is also on the horizon. It's about to make very rapid progress in a lot of scientific breakthroughs. This will be one of them, right? Like, will we be able to have better and better interfaces between human brains and computers? Yes. Does that mean that we're headed towards this Ray Kurzweil style, transhumanism, this kind of post singularity? Yeah, like, yes, that is happening. When? I don't know. I don't like. I suspect it's sooner than people think. Within the next 100 years, yeah, within the next 100 years, definitely, right? Like, my grandchildren will have access to well, maybe not my grandchildren, but probably my grandchildren, if not my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, will have access to whatever these capacities are, technologically speaking. Might there also be some kind of spiritual awakening that people have been talking about for a long time? Sure, of course, that's possible. And at the end of the day, like, I kind of want to get back to these things that I was saying earlier about Buddhism and such, right? Like, how does a person like me cope with the degree of uncertainty that I live with, right? Because I try to be very cautious about coming to any well-formed conclusion, right? Like, the conclusion I have about aliens and stuff is, I don't know, something's going on. It doesn't seem to be a hoax, and it doesn't seem to be misperception. It's weirder than that. Something real is here. What is it? I don't know. I can tell all kinds of stories about what it might be. I can tell too many kinds of stories about what it might be. This is part of my value. I take it to the ufology community, is like helping us think more imaginatively. No, the fact that the people had some kind of precognition about 9/11 does not imply time travel. It doesn't. It doesn't imply seeing the future. It could be something else. It could be telepathic hunching because I'm kind of hearing in the collective subconscious of humanity that something horrible is about to happen because there are humans currently planning to cause something horrible to happen, right? Like I want to keep all these imaginative ideas open. How do I deal with this? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it boils down to very, very simple questions like, who do I want to be? How do I want to live? I want to love my wife. I want to love my children. I want to take good care of my students, right? I want to be a healthy person. I want to enjoy the things I have when I have them. I want to be able to hang out with friends and have interesting conversations. And I want to be able to stand up for the poor and the powerless when I see people being hurt, who don't need to be hurt. I want to say, stop hurting them. I want to do what I can to help when people are being hurt. And all of that is real, no matter what else is real, right?
Yeah.
I've said many times now, and I would like this to be my catchphrase, right? Like the antidote to metaphysical uncertainty is moral certainty. Like I don't know what the world is like. I know that I should be living a life of kindness and peacemaking and joy and patience, and right, like I know that's the kind of person, that compassion, like that's the kind of person I want to be, no matter what else is going on. So like you have to ultimately, when you open your mind to the vast range of possibilities that people like you and I talk about, if you get obsessively stuck in that, you'll actually go crazy because you don't
Yeah.
have enough information to figure out what's going on. So you have to come back to that, like, okay, I don't know what's going on. How am I going to cope with that? I'm going to go take care of my people, take care of myself, watch for who might be getting hurt by whatever is going on in the world, try to help some of them as best we can. That's
Yeah, if you're looking for a dopamine hit in ufology and these topics, that's the wrong approach. I think you need to like do it with your pets. Go out and touch some grass, watch a movie.
Yeah.
Live reality as it is right now. Yeah, I agree with you.
Touch some grass, smoke some grass.
Yeah,
Come on, that
yeah.
needs to be your catchphrase. You need to make t-shirts.
I
Only
wanted
where
to.
it is legal and in responsible ways.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am
yeah.
only
I
advocating
mean,
for
here
legal, responsible drug use.
here in Tijuana, it's kind of legal already, so I don't have a problem there. But something that does worry me, though, and we see it happen with Skywatcher, it's happening in real time. You talked about this patenting of the telepathy from Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
With Skywatcher, they have two systems for attracting these.
Yep.
One is the dog whistle, which has 100% accuracy according to them. The
According
other
to
one
them.
is this, and the other one is the psionic. What does that tell you? It tells me that a machine is doing a better job than an actual human at a certain, task. And that's what worries me, though, that we're not going to be able to, and it goes back all the way to the aerial school contact, where they
Yep.
warned us to not be so technological.
Yeah.
And that will prevent us, or it can prevent us from trying to hone these abilities that we seem to have more organically. And we're just taking shortcuts, which is what's happening with the dog whistle, and which is what I think Elon wants to do with these
Yeah.
chips. And that's what I worry about the most when it comes to that merging of humans with technology. But I wanted to ask you before we leave about this AI
Yeah.
that is coming, because um, I was listening to Dr. Lee Cronin, who's a very materialistic kind of mind
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to science. and he claims, he thinks that the people that think that AI is going to become sentient
Mm,
are wrong.
mm,
And he's like, the people that think that AI is going to control us and like another Skynet is wrong, and the people that think that it's going to be all love and light when AI becomes sentient is wrong.
mm,
And he seems to think that AI won't become sentient. He thinks it's just a tool that
mm.
is used with all of our knowledge. It's just faster than us. Not
Yeah.
to say that it's not dangerous, because I think it is very, very dangerous. But what's your take on that? Where do you stand on the whole spectrum of AI can kill us or it won't? Or where do you stand there?
Yeah. Gosh. There's a lot here, right? So, the consciousness question is one of the hardest questions in philosophy, right? We actually call it the hard problem of consciousness, right? Which is like, how does consciousness emerge from this apparently unconscious world? Um, I don't know what to make of this, right? I'll, for the record, I'm inclined to go with some kind of panpsychism and say that, well, we actually have a kind of low level proto consciousness embedded in everything, right? Whatever the fundamental particles of the universe are, they have mass and spin and charge and some amount of consciousness, right?
We could call
Um,
it instinct too, right?
Sure, that's fine, right? Especially at those lower levels of consciousness or proto consciousness, it would be something like instinct. It wouldn't be like a deliberative process, right? It would just be
Yeah.
like I don't know, the atom has an instinct to decay, right? At a certain, within a certain half life. So imagine something like that. Then, and as you configure the world in various ways, then you might align those, kind of proto-conscious features of reality into ways that kind of lead to these bundled networks. And maybe that's what we are, right? Like we are, because of our brains, we have this complicated structure of all these atoms related to each other in a very delicately structured way. And maybe that's part of what leads to, or maybe that's what leads to the emergence of consciousness, right? Okay, let's just say that's true. Then here's what we know. Then there's one way that we know about for consciousness to emerge, right? Arrange neurons in the human way, and you get consciousness. Um, well, how else might things be arranged that lead to consciousness? Uh, there's a really wonderful book that my wife found that we listened to on our road trip to the Grand Canyon over the past summer, called The Light Eaters, which is about the consciousness of plants. Because it turns out that plants are way more aware and interacting with their environment than you would think.
Yeah.
Strikingly aware and interacting with their environment. Well, and this thing about like forests are actually all interconnected under the ground through the mycelium network, and
Yeah.
looks a lot like neurons. And then, oh gosh, are the forests aware? Yeah, they are. Are they
Yep.
aware in the way that we are? No. Are they aware in a way that it makes sense to talk about them having beliefs and values and actions? I don't know. I don't know, but maybe, right? Like,
I mean, psychedelics kind of answer that question, right? Because if you take mushrooms, they talk to you in many ways, you know?
I understand what you're saying, right? And like, I don't know. Like, I want to, me. I try to be careful about what I say here, and like, might it be that when you take mushrooms, certain parts of your brain that are associated with kind of individualization get turned off, and then you have these more global experiences? Yes. Might it also be true that we are communicating with the mycelium network? Yes, like that's a possibility, right? Like we really might be, because it's possible. Go look at the structure of these things that looks a lot like neural nets.
A
Might there be
brain.
information in that neural net? How big is this brain? Are we talking to the planet or to a forest, or right? Okay, complicated and hard questions. And so, like, all we actually know is that if we arrange things in a human brain way, we seem to get consciousness, right? What other ways might things be arranged that lead to consciousness? I don't know. Let's say, like, I have some very, very intelligent philosophically minded people, technologically minded people who think about AI, and they're convinced that because of the way that the AI is built, that it can't be conscious. I don't share this confidence with them, but let's give it to them for the minute. None of the AI we have right now are conscious. Okay. We shouldn't assume it's going to stay that way, right? There's already people who are working on biological computers, right? Computers that are actually made out of neurons, right? Well, gosh, if my brain is made out of neurons and it's conscious, then if we start making AI computers out of neurons, then they might be conscious. What if I have a chip in my brain which plugs me into a very advanced AI? I'm now a cyborg. The cyborg is conscious in virtue minimally of its biological self, right? So these questions are ill-formed again because people aren't thinking enough about what the options are, right? Like, even if I grant you, which I am not willing to actually grant you, right? Even if I grant you that ChatGPT and friends are not yet conscious, I remain agnostic about that. I don't know how consciousness emerges, so maybe they are, maybe they're not. If I say they're not, can I say with any great confidence that future generations of AI will not be conscious? No, there's no way I could say that, especially if we start making them out of different things and making them connect up to us in certain ways. Then, I'm not going to grant that. So, but the question that you also threw in there at the end about will they kill us or could they kill us? That's another hard question, right? And in all honesty, I am less afraid of the AI killing us. I am less afraid of the Skynet scenario than I am afraid of the, oh my gosh, whoever gets super intelligent artificial intelligence first has the best military strategists, the best engineers, the best core foundational scientists, the best biological scientists, the best medical solutions. Oh my gosh, whoever gets it first has a competitive advantage across the board in every way. Military, economic, political, in every way, whoever gets it first has maximum power. Okay, who knows that already? Everybody in power knows that already. If they're not, they will soon, right? And so, okay, so then, oh no, let's say that you're here in the United States, which we do seem to, at the time being, be at the head of the game. Then we might have some sense of security that we're going to get there first. Yay! Super intelligence belongs to the free world and our successful democratic society. Right?
I love you. You're doing this. I love that.
Yeah, in scare quotes, because the world is only sort of free and we are very puzzlingly only sort of democratic, right?
It's so
our
absurd.
conversation earlier, right? Okay, so are we gonna, let's say we get it first and we the Americans get to feel cozy about that. All right, what about everybody else on this big planet of ours, right? Like, what about those people in Greenland who are being threatened by the president of the United States daily that we want to take their country? What do we do about if you're in Canada who are being threatened by the president of the United States daily that we want to annex your country? Well, what do we want to do, right? If you're in China and more and more we see this country taking a nationalistic agenda, an isolationist nationalistic agenda, right? God, that looks really scary. And then if you say, well, they already have the most guns and the most nukes and you're right. Wow, that sounds really scary. Do we really want this country who has been described after the end of the Cold War as a hyperpower, right? In the Cold War, we had two superpowers, the Soviets and the United States were the kind of big players there, right? And when the Soviet Union fell, the United States became the world's first hyperpower. Planet-wide global domination became the privilege of only the United States. And, over the last couple of decades, especially China has emerged as another player, is beginning to be in a place to kind of challenge the global supremacy of the United States. Okay, how are they going to feel about AI being super intelligent AI and all that comes with it being in the hands of the United States? They're going to be terrified. They should be terrified, right? And like just game theoretically, right? Thinking from a kind of international relations kind of a like, imagine this as a game and we're competing against each other. Yeah. So what's that going to do? Gosh, that's going to start creating motivations to do things like not only just pump more and more resources into AI, which is what everybody's currently doing, but at some point, it might start to generate motivations to do really terrible things like nuke people or attack them to stop them from getting a power that they will never then surrender, right? Like the idea that there is some subset of humanity that is about to get so much power that they will be able to centralize control of the whole planet indefinitely. That's something that'll make people afraid, and afraid people do bad things, right? Afraid
Yeah.
people do bad things. And I don't want afraid people doing bad things. So I'm less worried about the AI itself hurting us. I'm more worried about us hurting each other on the way to or through this transition where we gain these, these superhuman capacities using at least our technology. And then we can go back and ponder about the ways in which this might relate to the kind of spiritual, psychic kinds of worlds also, which I suspect are also real and not entirely distinct. And I don't know how these things fit together.
So essentially, adding the human element is what uh, worries you, and it should, because
Yeah.
historically, we don't have a
I
great
mean,
track record.
like the nuclear strategy called mutually assured destruction is what aptly named, because it's mad. It's crazy. Like, what a crazy thing to do, right? To build enough bombs to destroy the whole planet just so that hopefully the other people will be scared enough that they won't do what we did by winning a war by decimating whole cities, right? Like, that is an unstable solution to us living together on the same planet, right? Like, let's just keep aiming world destroying weapons at each other, and nobody lets it down first, because if anybody does, then they'll get nuked. And so we just always have to be aiming the nukes at each other forever. And that's the way humanity is going to be indefinitely. Like, come on, that can't be the answer. So yeah, what is the answer? We haven't invented the answer. Or, I mean, the answer is actually, as always, the answer is straightforward: love and peace and universal compassion
Do
and
you think
kindness.
disclosure can help answering that? Do you think that's why there's such a concerted effort by people from the military and the intelligence community, because they feel like that's the way?
I don't know. I definitely think it's relevant, right? I do suspect that the reason for the cover up, the reason for the secrecy, is because they know how disruptive this will be to the status quo. And we're afraid of moving into whatever this world might look like, because it would be so different than what we know right now. We can't even imagine what it's like, right? And I like um, uh, I like these characters, our intelligence and military characters who are speaking to us about giving us information, our whistleblowers and friends, right? Like, I'm grateful for them. They're also approaching this from a kind of military national security perspective. And like, national security is not what we should be thinking about. We
Nope,
should be
it's not.
thinking about global flourishing, right?
Yeah,
The global well-being of all of us, including the other aspects of our ecosystem with which we are interconnected, right? National security is a temporary thing to be worried about, because all nations are temporary. And yeah, I want us to think beyond national security, because the national security model has us embedded in this mad way of thinking about things, right? Where
yeah.
we're over here and these are our adversaries. Even all through the DC disclosure stuff, there's all this talk about our adversaries getting a competitive advantage and like the ontological surprise, and like, yeah, that whole way of approaching this cannot be our long-term future. And you know, could disclosure help? Yes. Will disclosure be disruptive? Definitely. Can we make it through this moment intact? Some of us will, yes. Like even in the worst case scenario, right? Like, I mean, I guess the very worst case scenario is that everybody launches all of the nukes, and then maybe this is just a barren rock, right?
That
But
or a geophysical event, though, because that's also being talked
yeah,
about a lot.
yeah. What do you have in mind? Like most geophysical events, like it's conceivable that there would be a geophysical event which would make Earth uninhabitable to humans. That's probably true. Although, man, humans are really really clever and like
Either
really
a
flexible.
massive asteroid impact or something like that,
Yeah, yeah.
or yeah, something like that.
So what I'm suggesting is even under these like super apocalyptic scenarios, I expect that some of us will survive. There's a
Yeah,
lot of us, and
yeah,
we're very very adaptable, creative, durable little things, right?
we are.
Um, but yeah, but I don't want us to have to go through that. Like,
No, me neither.
it would be great if we could not nuke each other. Um, bands together and pay attention to the rocks in space, pay
Yep,
attention to what's happening with our sun and whether it might be dumping radiation at us, and be prepared for that. You know, just imagine for a minute if instead of competing with all of the engineers in China and Russia and Iran and Syria and every place, like, what if we were actually working together on solving climate change,
all the
food,
problems.
like if we like I've said this before on other podcasts, I'll say it again. Our problems are political problems. We have the knowledge of the world, the scientific and technological of the world, to feed everybody and make everybody be comfortable. We do.
Yep,
Easily. We could do it easily at this point. We are so good at growing food and building homes and being very efficient and all that. Everyone can have all their basic needs met. Why aren't they met? Politics.
and
Politics.
greed.
Well, yes. Well, greed-based politics,
Yeah,
right? Um, and
yeah.
um, and I just want to be very, very clear here because I think it's very important. When I say politics, I very, very clearly do not mean Republican versus Democrat
Oh
politics,
no,
right? No, 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 no.
no.
Like that whole system of Republican versus Democrat is a part of a political system, right? That it, you know, that the founders created, was very creative and interesting, and there were some really successful things about it. There's also very clearly showing its age at this point. Congress simply cannot function at all. It can't get anything done at all, right? The executive is growing in power, much to the terror of the founders, right? Like the primary thing the founders wanted to do was prevent someone posting on X, "Long live the king," right? Which the current president of the United States did do, right? So, like, man, every founder is turning over in their graves. Oh no, we failed to create a system of checks and balances to prevent the monarch. Everything they were doing was to prevent a monarch from rising to power, right? And here we have people like Curtis Yarvin talking about how we need an American Caesar, and a lot of the people on the kind of X side of the spectrum are like, yeah, that's what we need, a CEO in charge of the world. And it's like, guys,
We're going backwards. What the hell?
this was like actually the point of this country is not that. But
Yeah,
anyway, yes. So, but again, like that's the kind of politics I'm interested in, right? The
yeah.
like how do we collectively work together, people's voices getting heard, people's needs getting met, allowing ourselves to be really massively diverse, right? And you know, somehow diversity and equity and inclusion have turned into a bad word, right? And it's like, I don't know, man, how did we get here? Madness, right? But those are the solution, not the problem. And in as much as the solution is being seen as a problem, that's a problem. So politics, yes, of course, it has implications for the kind of politics that we're used to. But mostly, what I'm advocating for is thinking about politics beyond the politics that we're used to, not a right versus left, blue versus red, but a like China versus the United States, North versus South. No, 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 none of that. That's garbage, right? Like all of that is garbage. How about us versus our collective problems, right? Us versus a planet that is not doing well, filled with pollution, species going extinct at an unprecedented rate, climate changing at an unprecedented rate. That problem.
Yeah.
How do we feed all of our people? Who are our people? All of the people, right?
Yeah.
All of the people on this planet. How do we feed them? How do we help them be free? How do we help them do the things that we all want to be able to do? Love each other, be creative, do art, have fun, play games. All right, like how do we do that for
Education is
everybody?
very important
Yes,
too.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. For all of us, for all of us, every single person on this planet and our non-human friends. Like, how do we take better care of them? Right? Like, how do we not torture our cows by putting them in these like just vast fields of shit, as far as the eye can see? Right? Like, no, like the whole way we're doing almost everything is wrong, at scale at least. At an individual level, people are people. They love their people. They're doing good things. Like I don't want to hate on any individual person. I don't want to hate on any individual person, even the very, very powerful ones, right? Like they're just people. They needed more hugs, right? Um, it in many ways it is not their fault. They have the kind of need for affirmation and stuff that leads them to kind of gather global power to scratch their deep psychological itches. It's I can have compassion on them, but like we shouldn't just let them do what they're doing to all of us,
Yep.
because of their
Unchecked.
psychology. Yeah, yeah. We have in a way we're failing them too, right? Like
Yeah.
what they actually need is like growth and therapy and like actually confronting some of the reasons that they are trying to gather so much power, right? Wealth and power.
Mhm.
Why do you need that much wealth and power? Oh, trauma. Like you should probably go to therapy for that, right? Hang out with my friend Pavel and take some more mushrooms, and um, uh, 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 again under appropriate supervision in ways that are
Legally,
legally and backed by effective research, right? Which of
yeah,
course, as you know, there's more
and
and more evidence.
professionals.
This is where we want to be. We don't want it to be we don't want it to be illegal. We want it to be legal and regulated responsibly, so that we can use it as the tool that it seems to be for people, et cetera, right? Like, yeah, that's what we want. We want all of us to do well, including the powerful. I don't want to eat the rich. I want the rich to be healed and whole, and to realize they don't have to be rich in order to be happy. And I don't want them to die. I don't want guillotines. I don't want guillotines.
Yeah, and to
Um,
realize that empathy is not a weakness; it's a strength.
yeah, yeah, that. Empathy is the strength. That's right. I want to be in a place where I could sit down with my current political adversaries and laugh and work on these problems together. And that's the world I want to live in. And I hope we get there, Pavel.
Yep.
There's a lot of things to be concerned about right now, but you know, humans are not all bad.
These
When we do it,
conversations are very important to have, though.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we take care of each other well, we do cool stuff, and I
Yeah,
want us to do more cool stuff,
we do.
taking care of each other well.
So it's been a pleasure as always, but I want you to tell people what's going on with the Invisible College before I leave you,
I don't
because
know about the invisible
the
college,
Visible College. I'm sorry.
but the visible college. Visible college is a informal network of people of kind of scholarly academic background who are hanging out with each other these days. We're kind of meeting once a week, and we have kind of internal talks. People will give like short half an hour to 40-minute long lectures, and then we'll do a little Q&A discussion. That's the main thing that we're doing. We're thinking about, we want to be more visible than we are. I promise that the lack of visibility is not any kind of intentional
or secrecy or
hiding.
anything.
No,
Yeah.
it's not that. It's actually literally just lack of resources. Like, you know, how do we get the recording of the Zoom edited into a YouTube video and posted and maintain a social media account and make sure that the meetings happen on time and that the Zoom links are correct and everybody who wants to apply gets their access to their information in a way that's safe. We do have a non-disclosure agreement, but it's essentially a non-doxing non-disclosure agreement. There are people who want to be involved,
Which
but who
is
don't want to be.
completely fair.
Yeah, that's all
Completely
we're
fair.
doing. So, like we say, anything you share publicly, you have to have the consent of anybody else involved in it. And that's the NDA basically. So that does exist, but that's it. And yeah, we encourage people to do stuff. We've got a couple of things up on our website now. If you go to thevisiblecollege.org, there's 2 papers up there. One on the experience of ontological shock, and one on ways in which children might be impacted and also be impactful through the disclosure. I highly encourage people who care about this stuff to go out to thevisiblecollege.org and check those out. I hope to be able to, release some of these lectures that are happening internally as videos, maybe have like a public Q&A of some of those kinds of lectures and stuff. There's a couple of ideas we have. The only reason those things aren't happening right now is lack of resources, and the primary resource is time, right?
Yeah.
And, so, if there's people sitting on thousands and millions of dollars that they would like to use to contribute to more progress, then we could maybe free up some people's time to do some cool stuff. But we built ourselves from the ground up to be a lightweight, essentially free organization. We don't have really any overhead. Everybody's got day jobs, right? So but that's why you don't see results, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't see results because it's a hobby project for all of us, and that's all it can be given our current level of resources.
I mean, you've already written 2 papers, so I wouldn't say you don't have any.
I agree. No, we're having an impact, but it'll be a kind of slow and quiet impact over time, and that's what we will be for the foreseeable future. And we'll see beyond that. And obviously, there's potential big stuff on the horizon, right? The Age of Disclosure documentary looks like it might get a theatrical release. If it does, that would be great. Even if it only gets a digital release, that would be great. It sounds like it was a great documentary. I have not had a chance to see it, but that will raise awareness. David Grush has been hired by Burleson, right, as a staffer. There's this scheduled SCIF meeting, I think, at the end of the month between, I think it's Mel and Elizondo Grush and friends and some of the congressional people. That's great. We've been trying to make that happen ever since Grush came forward. That might lead to some progress. Luna's committee thing, task force, might lead to some progress. At any moment, the mothership might show up over every major city, right? Like, who knows? Who knows what might happen? And if that happens, then we'll have more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, if the world keeps going the way it is geopolitically, they should show up.
Well, okay, but I'm worried about if that happens, right? I'm a prime directive person, right? So if we screw up so badly that they have to intervene in that regard, then whatever the bad. Okay, so the whole idea of the prime directive is, generally speaking, it's not good for a more powerful, knowledgeable entity to mess too much with the population. Why? Problems. Okay, so we screw up bad enough that they intervene. Problems. Whatever the problems are that the prime directive exists to protect us from, we are no longer protected from them, right? And I expect that has to do with things like our own autonomy and our own capacity to kind of do things the way we want to. And if we want to be grown-ups, right, then we got to grow up. If we keep acting like babies, then maybe we get a slap on the wrist, and I don't want a slap on the wrist.
Evolutionarily, we're going the way we're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see.
Oh, Steven, it was a pleasure as always talking to you. I hope we can do this again soon.
Sure, man. Whatever.
Yeah. And have a great rest of your week, man.
You too.
Yeah, I'm going to leave links in the description for the visiblecollege.org. And think about what we spoke about today. Let me know what you have to say in the comments. Anything, the comments are there. Thank you,
Right.
Stephen. Have a
Absolutely
good
good,
one,
Steven.
man.
Yep. Bye.
Take care.